Right, please welcome Simon Hearne.
That was brief. So there are three things in work that you can't get me to shut up about. That's data visualization, the impact of JavaScript on performance on crappy devices, and
Yeah, my Moto G.
your Moto G version 1, is it?
4.
Oh, thanks for that. And third-party content. And I haven't done a third-party talk at LDNWebPerf before, so here I am. In my private life, there are also three things you can't get me to shut up about. One of them I can't mention. Another one is bicycles. Another one is home automation, so there's actually 4. And another one is 3D printing. And all of these are expensive things. And life's too short to work hard to pay for these expensive things, so I live in debt most of my life. But recently I was thinking, how can I make more money without actually doing any more work? Aha. Unfortunately, I have 0.00038 of a Bitcoin, which makes me worth about £50. And I've tried 3 of these, and all of them have cost me more than have actually generated in revenue. So I believe these things, even though they say not a scam, may be a scam. But I can kind of code. I'm not a developer, and I'm going to caveat this talk very heavily with that. Most of Dora's talks went straight over my head. But I can do enough to pretend and have a black background on my terminal and have green text. So I thought, what can I do with these amazing skills that I have? I once built a website using PHP and Bootstrap version 1. That's back-end and front-end, so I'm full stack. So I should build a phishing site. Anyone built a phishing site? Surprisingly easy. Unfortunately, I know nothing about modern web technologies, so I thought, what do the cool kids use nowadays? And it turns out it's all different shades of gray and green. I don't know what Express is. Something to do with Node. And that V is something called Vue, which is something to do with the front end that's kind of like Node, but it's all JavaScript. So what do you do when you want to learn a new technology? Go to GitHub, search for it, and clone a repo. And I found this great thing called the Hackathon Starter Project, and I thought that's brilliant because I want to do some hacking. And you have to just have a single git command. I've done that before, so I can do that. And then some npm thing, and I tested. I've already got npm installed on my machine. No idea why. And then I did this great thing. So clone my git repo, did that bit right. Spell npm correctly. Oh, I had to change directory. Spell npm correctly, didn't spell install correctly. And I was watching this, and I thought, okay, this is all fine. I'm just validating something. And then there's just this sea of crap that I have no idea what it does. And it goes on and on and on and on and on and on and on. And it's done. And I thought, brilliant. And it ran, so that was good. But then I wanted to work out why there was so much crap coming into my computer, this machine that I borrowed from my work. And there's a visualization tool. There's always visualization tools. There's a link down the bottom. And Express has a lot of dependencies, approximately 49. And I had no idea what these did. And on the left-hand side of this graph, you get a little pretty picture that shows you all the different people that maintain these modules. And I thought, that one hasn't got an avatar. That's probably anonymous, because they are anonymous. And I thought, people do this for front-end code as well. So people are getting modules into the code that they're shipping to their customers. This seems like a great way to hack. I could be that person. I don't have a Gravatar account. It's fine. So I was thinking about what I could do to hack. And one of the nice things that you get in most credit card forms is you type in 4 and it says Visa. I knew you're going to do that. Or 5 and it goes American Express. Because it's cool, because it's really simple. There's just a set of regular expressions to work out which type of card it is. So to build a module in Vue is something that even I could do that takes the first 4 digits of a number and says probably Visa, probably MasterCard. So I wrote a module called credit card type. Anyone used it? Lucky. Oh, you may have done, because it's a dependency in a lot of projects now. I'll leave you with that. So I wrote some code which I haven't put in here, which is an obfuscated fetch, which sends data back to my server. And I only send it if I'm not on dev, I'm not on QA, I'm not on local. If random is greater than if less is greater than 0.3, that's actually a typo. No, it's not. It's true. So I can randomly send stuff back based on some arbitrary parameters, based on which environment we're on, or whether DevTools is open, or whether it's between working hours. The server listening for credit card information. 2 months later. I did a hack. It's not a true story. Has anyone read that story recently? Yeah. The Hacker Noon story, yeah. It's much better in print than I've put it into slides. But it makes you wonder how much content is on your site without you having any control over it or having an understanding of why it's there. It's true with Webpack as well. You just see all these module dependencies and you get a nice graph to show, here's 6 coming off one node. Why are there 6 coming off that node? And none of us have the time to look into it. So anyone put their hand up if they're confident they know all the code that's running in their application? I wrote mine in PHP with no package control. And do not data is leaking from the browser. And that's the most interesting thing about that Hacker Noon post is it's actually really hard to tell what's coming out of your customers' browsers back to somewhere that isn't your own server because you're not involved in that process. So the worst thing is that as engineers, who here would identify themselves as an engineer? Oh, about half. Who here would identify themselves as a program manager, product manager, owning a product type thing? Okay, who's the other half of the room that hasn't put their hands up? That's an engineer. Yeah. See, I identify as an engineer, but not as a developer, so I can kind of get that. You didn't put your hand up for either. All right, okay. So here will identify themselves as a developer or an engineer. There we go. Who here runs a marketing budget? Who here runs a campaign optimization budget? So we don't have control over this stuff, and we shouldn't have to care about it. Unfortunately, they break our applications. So we do. So stage 1, why should we care? The first one is because it's really interesting. And as developers / engineers, we like the unknown unknown. We like to open Pandora's box and spend 6 hours, whiskey-fueled midnight coding rampage, looking at what's going on. But also because they can break us. Everyone's familiar with single points of failure, I hope. If you put a third-party dependency in your page, which is a JavaScript asset or a CSS asset, in your standard code, it's going to break your site if they become unavailable. If they become slow, it's the worst because the browser will wait 20 seconds on a Windows machine, 150 seconds on a Mac OS machine before it'll give up waiting for that response and then show you a page. So you're basically down. But there's more interesting things like Optimizely. Anyone here use or heard of Optimizely? Anyone like Optimizely? So they do cool stuff, right? They overwrite all of your content based on whatever someone in marketing decides it should be. One of my ex-clients actually use this as their main website editing tool because they use a third-party agency for their code development and it's too expensive. The problem with this is, one, it blocks render because that's the way it works. Don't show them something until you've worked out what you really want to show them. But also their SLA that they measure themselves against on their status page, 100% success, by the way, is whether their HTTP snippet loads within half a second from America. One, you can't load it over HTTP anymore. It has to be HTTPS. That's a couple of round trips I've saved. And half a second. If a critical third-party asset takes half a second longer than it should, that's your web page, your whole application taking half a second longer than it should. They don't hold themselves to the same standards that we do. So we need to care about it as engineers and developers. I love this. This is jQuery.com. They load all of their JavaScript assets, apart from jQuery, from their own domain. jQuery, they use code.jQuery.com, which is interesting. One, because it uses HTTPS. So at least they've got a preload header. Oh, no, they don't. So this is interesting. So they load jQuery at the top of their list of script tags. But because it takes so long to establish a TLS collection, because this was tested on a non-secure site, it actually loads later than almost everything else. But it's fine because it's in the right order and the browser knows what to do about it. So they've got 2 third-party dependencies before DOM load on jQuery.com. jQuery and Typekit, because who doesn't need web fonts? The great thing about Chrome DevTools is you can see what happens when something breaks. So let's block jQuery from jQuery.com. They have no fallback if jQuery doesn't load from their CDN. Normally, you load jQuery, check that the jQuery variable exists. If it doesn't, load it from a local. No, they don't. What's really interesting about this is the website is still totally functional without it. They don't actually use jQuery for any critical functions on their website. Why would you? Let's look at Font Awesome. Who here uses the web font version of Font Awesome? Bad people. They offer an SVG alternative, which is much better for accessibility, because if you block that web font, they have a fallback to a TTF file, which doesn't render in Chrome. So you get squares. The problem with using web fonts is well explained by Andy's daughter. Basically, they're not accessible. And you have to load a web font, which is a blocking asset. SVG is great. You can inline it. It's small, scalable. You can color it. Again, this is a little fail. Moving swiftly onto something really technical, event listeners. This is something Andy and I were talking just before my talk. Anyone heard of the before unload event? Yeah, a few people, maybe about a third of the room. It's this magic event that lets you attach event listeners before the page goes away from what it's trying to do. So you click a link, you enter a URL in the address bar and hit enter. The browser says, oh, hold on a second. I'm just going to check if any third parties or first-party code wants to do something before I navigate away. And it won't actually initiate the navigation until that code has finished executing. So in this case, we've got a few fun third parties attached to that event, including us, but you can't see it, so that's fine. And in this case, it took 1.6 seconds between clicking on a link and the page actually starting the navigation for that link. 2 seconds before the page moved on to the next context. So, input latency, there was this whole thing about 300 milliseconds for double tap on phones. You remember the double tap 300 milliseconds? That was noticeable. 1.6 seconds is downright irritating. We should all make our third-party JavaScript async, right? In web page test, you can see loading webpagetest.org, getting really meta, that ads by Google has about half a second of JavaScript execution. That's the fuchsia area in the web page test graph. And then we get to execute some of my code, so analytics. Then we get to execute some more analytics from Google, and then we get to execute the site bundle. And they kind of change like that. So even though the site JavaScript bundle loaded before some of the third-party content, you couldn't execute until after some of the third-party content had executed, which is weird. Has anyone had third-party code actually break their site before? A couple of people. I've had a client lose their website entirely for 40 minutes. Cost them over £100,000. And of that 40 minutes, only about 1 minute was trying to work out what was wrong. 39 minutes was trying to work out how to fix it, because it's a third-party issue, not their own. And you can have really horrible things. This is Cloudflare, so we shouldn't play this back to the next speaker. But they have like an ad block detection thing that you can turn on. And they just lock the UI for 3 seconds and put an alert up saying, oh, you got an ad block. So you should probably disable that because it's breaking my page. And we found this on 2 other sites with non-Cloudflare-based third parties. Just blocking, or doing a while true debugger. So you can't open DevTools and inspect the code. OK, so what are we dealing with? With your application, you likely know most of what's going on. Request map is something I presented here probably 2 years ago now. And it shows you all the assets on the site, and it's really interesting, and that's fine. Web page test gives you the same data. Oh, Patrick, do you want to take it? Has anyone used this view in web page test before? To see all the third parties on your site. Webpagetest.org if you haven't used it before. And there's a magic thing with web page test. On almost any page you go to, oh, this is really big. Type $f equals JSON, and you get the JSON representation of all the data on that page, which you can. That's really ugly. Woo. Now, the request map generator, well, the request map, which I showed briefly earlier, has a little bookmarklet. So you can go to that page where you can see the content download. You know what, let's do this. Whoa. Well, that's disappointing. I tell you what, let's do it live, because that never goes wrong. Web page test. Didn't run it in this log, did I? No. Result. Result. All right, so here's our domains. There's my bookmarks bar with a bookmarklet, and it gives me all of the stuff that came down, which is interesting. An underused feature of this is the CSV export. And knowing my machine, Excel will take half an hour to start. There we go. Told you it'd take half an hour. So this gives you all of the third-party domains on your site, as well as what they were. So Akamai Performance Analytics, that's me, Google Tag Management, and how much time was spent waiting for them, how much content came from them, how many requests came down. So that's interesting. And that's a good basis to start a third-party audit. All right, none of my videos are going to work. Luckily, I've only got about 10. Okay, who's used resource timing before, the resource timing API? Yay, about half of the room. So this is a magical thing in browsers that tells us how fast or slow all the requests were on a page. In this example, we're looking at the main CSS from the Akamai homepage. And we get lots of information with JavaScript precision around how long it took. The problem is that you only get the first 150 requests by default. So if you're like most websites out there, you start losing data really quickly. But you can fix that. As long as you can execute that line of code before it gets to 150, you're fine on every page view. Resource timing API isn't supported by WebKit. Isn't supported by Safari. We don't support resource timing from Safari. And if a third party, if you're trying to get resource timing information from a third-party domain and they don't have the timing allow origin header, you get start and end and basically nothing else. Oh, and the URL. But it means you don't get cache status, how big it was, how long you spent on TLS negotiation, how long you spent speaking to the server, and how long you spent actually downloading the resource. But there's great things you can do with that data if you're okay with those caveats, and it's all open source. So on the left, you've got Boomerang, which is a JavaScript snippet that collects it, and it has a plugin for resource timing. And on the right, you've got Boomcatch, which is a Springer Nature project, interestingly enough, and which is a node server which consumes that Boomerang data that's beacon back and does things with it. But this is all a lot of hard work, so you can pay these people to do it for you. I'm the top left one. That's a really old logo. I'm going to get in trouble. Oh, no. So once you've got this data, that's great. The problem is, is this going to work? Ignore everything you're seeing until I tell you otherwise. So you've got resource timing data from, say, 10 million page views. That's a lot of content to try to consume. At the moment, you can look at waterfall charts of 10 million page views, which doesn't have a lot of interest for me because I don't have that much time in my life. So what about a distribution of when those resources come down during the page load event? So here we can see, for example, 2 fonts being preloaded and the rest not. What's really interesting is for third parties, let's just focus on scripts, when they come down and if there are any dependencies between the third parties. So this particular client had an analytics product which depended on loading at a particular time. So we could start to see when that asset was likely to load based on all that resource timing data that we got. So there will be live demos. Now this one may not work as a live demo. So the Hackanoon thing, one of the comments was, it's really hard to detect this third-party traffic that you're not involved in. And content security policies can be worked around. Standard code analysis techniques can be worked around. The resource timing API would collect that data. And because in that particular case, it was in the query string, you'd get all the data as well. So you could start to see if it was unique to each user. So how about just having a look at all the third parties on the site? I don't know how it's going to work. How about that? I've just screwed up my host file, which is why that's not working anymore. Anyway, I can show you what it would have looked like in a 1/4 size video. Oh, you can see the screenshot. So all the third parties in your site packed in by what domain they're from, what type it is, whether it's JavaScript or HTML, and colored by how slow it was. So red is over a second. And in this case, they had some really weird third-party content that took over a second. Around here is all their images, and they got some really poorly optimized images. Another thing I'd like to talk about. All right, so you know what's on the site, hopefully by now, with or without quarter-size videos. Who's used block and spoff in web page test before? These are really easy to script. So block is just block and then a spaced separated list of things you want to block. And spoffing is redirecting the DNS to a black hole domain. And you can script that using Andy's Google spreadsheet. So you can automate these tests to say, what happens if I block all the third parties on my site? Does it get faster or slower? I'll give you one clue, it gets faster. And then you can see in the visual representation how much faster it got. And that's the way you sell getting rid of third parties to the people who really want them there. Another quarter-size video. All right, let's go for it. Why not? This is clean because it doesn't have any client data in it. So here we have all the page groups we've collected data, resource timing data from. And on each page group, we've got all the resources. So we've got a broken waterfall down here. And here are all the resources on the site ordered by their impact on the page load time. So if you have a resource that's really slow but doesn't actually affect anything, you don't care about it, so it'll be down the bottom. And what we can start doing is having a look at, so this is Pinterest. We can take off Pinterest. And if you see over here, the product page group's got a little bit faster, and your whole page has got a whole 25 milliseconds faster. The next step for this is to translate that into a what-if analysis to say, getting Pinterest off the site gives us an extra £10,000 per week. So we're going to get Pinterest off the site because it has no defendable ROI. And that's where resource timing becomes really powerful, unlike Google Slides. All right, we like judging people. So this is using NCC group synthetic monitoring on Delta VConf's website. This is getting really meta now. And this is Pardo or Pardot? Pardot. It does personalization and email campaign stuff, I think. And that's the response time over a week. And blue is the server response time. And this isn't necessarily a big issue because it doesn't block any part of the UI, apart from the whole section at the bottom appears when the script executes. So if someone scrolls down to the bottom and 2 seconds later it goes poof, it's a little bit of a weird user experience. But it's not my job to get rid of it. Has anyone used a CDN finder tool before on CDN Planet? This is such a cool little tool. You put in a website and it tells you all the different domains and whether they're using a CDN or not. So if you work for a CDN, it's a good way to do competitor analysis. But it's also a good way to audit your third parties. Because if they're not using the same level of CDN as you, then they're a weak part of your website. And this is a great one. I'm not going to tell you what website this is from. But this is optimix.asia. This is loaded on a UK site from a UK browser. It's got no version in the URL. I like versioned assets. I like immutable assets. This one hasn't changed for the last year and a half, so it could be immutable. It can't be served from cache without validation, so I have to send an if modified since header, which means when I make that round trip to Hong Kong, it takes a really long time. And this is in a blocking chain of requests, so this actually makes the rest of the site feel really slow. And they say they're using Nginx 1.0.6. I don't know if anyone could possibly still be using a server that old. Anyone using? Yeah. But it could just be a reverse proxy. And how should we load jQuery? We should load it as a script at the bottom of the page, because if you put it at the bottom of the page, everything is good. Andy actually wrote about this in 2013, how the look-ahead pre-parser in most browsers will go through the document and say, that's a script. That's important, so I'm going to pull it right to the top and load it as soon as possible. But we can fix this. And I'm going to tell you how later, because I don't know the order of my slides. Has anyone here got an offline capable website or app using Service Worker? I know the FT have got a little bit going on. A few people. Do your third parties work when your site's offline? And that's a really interesting one, because your analytics it's quite important that it works when your site's offline. And as a side project, you may not think about it. Obviously, with a production website, you would think about it. In this case, the Facebook ads don't work, and that's expected. You wouldn't expect customized adverts to be coming down a non-existent network. But here we're using the offline Google Analytics script to store up all of our events probably using the sync API, background sync API, to send off when we come online again. But if your site breaks when it's offline because of a third party being offline, that's a really interesting problem to have. All right, so we know that third parties are crap and they break your website and they make it slow. What do we do about it? This is actually a Makeazine project. You can make an internet off switch, and it does take the internet from your modem to your router and turn it off, which I think is a lovely idea. As long as you automate it using home automation, then you won't be able to turn it back on again. Does anyone here use feature toggles or feature flags on third-party content? Oh, a few people do. Awesome. How do you do it? You do it on your origin, at your cache, at your CDN, at origin. So you can do it at origin. There you go. You can do it at origin or the edge. Just have a feature toggle on every single critical blocking third party. If they go down, you won't spend 39 minutes trying to work out how to get them off the site. If you do it at origin, then you need to do a fast purge and have a CDN that supports it and does it quickly enough. In tag managers, it's surprisingly hard to just quickly get rid of a tag in a way that's recoverable or easily recoverable without having to go back through configurations. So you can create trigger exceptions and just have a catch-all exception so that trigger will never fire to get rid of your third parties. Anyone had to do that before? Rip off a third party through a tag manager? We just haven't noticed it go wrong. So we need to host our own JavaScript. Who here uses a JavaScript CDN for a personal project? Anything? Oh, OK. You're a dead audience to me. How about hosting your own fonts? Who here uses a font CDN? Or CDN provided font provider type thing? A few people. Oh, not many. That's good. On HTTP Archive, over 50% of the sites do use a font provided CDN, majority being Google Fonts because it's really easy. The nice thing about hosting your own fonts is you save a connection, you get all the HTTP2 benefits, assuming you're on HTTP2, so you can push the web font from your server, from the edge, and you get to subset your own fonts. Google is particularly good at this because you can do subsetting through their API. No other font provider lets you do that. So instead of sending 500 glyphs, you just send the 64 that you need for your language. And Google Web Fonts are almost wholly MIT licensed. So you can download them and host them yourselves. And there's many tools. There were originally tools that scraped Google Fonts using different user agent strings to try and get all the different font variants down. Now Google, it's all on GitHub. So the whole Google Fonts project is on GitHub with all the font files that you need. And there's nice little help tools to get the code for you. All right, A/B testing. No one likes Optimizely. Does anyone like A/B testing at all? Brilliant. So a few people do. Who uses a third party to do that A/B testing that they like? Oh, go on. Go on. Who do you use? Oh. You would like this. I love this. This is
Split web farms.
Split web farms, canary testing, and feature toggles. The problem is that A/B testing frameworks are really appealing to non-technical users because you just get your IT team to say, here's a script, put it on the site, and I'm going to turn the button red. Ooh. 2 days later, I've made a decision. All buttons should be red. This is a post from Orange Valley, an agency in the Netherlands, who noticed that when they put an A/B testing framework on their client site, it made everything shit. So then they took it off again. And they said, this isn't good because all of our clients want A/B testing, but we want our client sites to be fast. We measure ourselves on it, and we provide SLAs to our clients, and we can't have third parties messing with that. This is a PS. This is a post called Optimizely Almost Got Me Fired. It's originally titled Optimizely Got Me Fired, so I don't know if this guy got fired and then got rehired back again. But he was doing A/B testing, and it showed great results for particular variants. So they pushed those variants to production and got no response, no uptick in conversions. So he decided to do an AA test, the same pages, the same variants, And the result from Optimizely was an 18% improvement in conversion, 100% chance to beat variant B. Apparently, they've changed some of their algorithms since then. What I find interesting, so Orange Valley said, this is great, third party's crap, let's work out which is the best of the crap bunch. And SiteSpect came out on top. Anyone know why SiteSpect would come out on top? Because it's server-side. You're not executing blocking JavaScript on your client's pages. And you can do it yourself using anything at the edge, using feature toggles. So the only problem is no one's done a good version apart from SiteSpect that is commercially available. Because people like to buy stuff. Yeah, Optimizely X. It still has a massive JavaScript bundle. And it's much more expensive than normal Optimizely. All right, who has a business process for third-party code? Who has like a well-defined process for how to get code on your site? A few people with wobbly hands. Cool. The client that I worked with who had the most success had the most horrendous process to get third-party tags on the site. It would take 6 months. And the business was getting really upset, but they stuck with it. And now they have a really fast website. So rather than marketing coming to me and saying, I need this tag from this provider. We had this great lunch on the golf course, and it's only going to be £500,000 but it's going to give us 100 million quid a year return in revenues, which is actually a real figure that one of my clients told me. They say, I want to do multivariate testing because I want to experiment with different versions of the pages to try to optimize conversion rate. They're not allowed to mention a product. The technical team then says, we've probably got something that would already do this, so let's explore the tags that are already on the site, the relationships we already have with third parties, and then go out to market and see what else is available and find a solution that fits. Get procurement to do their bit, because that's horrible. And then deploy the code in Sprint, so it's well-defined, it's documented. Go back to the original business requirement and say, does this meet what you wanted to do? Are you going to use it? If yes, then we'll keep it on the site. And then maybe 6 months later, say, are you still using it? And this is where most people get caught up. We've worked really hard to get this third-party tag on the site. And then the next new thing comes along, and no one bothers to audit what's been going on for the last 4 or 5 years. And one of our clients was 65% of their tags were unused or had no commercial relationship with the vendors. All right, so we've got no choice with most of our third parties. We're lowly engineers and developers. But we're engineers and developers, so we should be excited about fixing things, even if they're not our problem. Script async and defer. Preferences for defer nowadays. Anyone disagree with that? So normal script tags block the HTML parsing, which means if you have a script tag at the top, and this is why script tags were historically should have been put at the bottom for third parties, it means the whole document stops being built. With defer, go and fetch the JavaScript whenever you want, and then let the browser decide when it should execute it. The nice thing about defer is it preserves order of execution. So if you have jQuery, then jQuery UI, then jQuery UI bundle that does auto something or other, they will execute in the order that you provide them, so you won't have to do double checks that jQuery is already initialized. I guess about half the people here use some kind of prefetching or preloading. Yeah, you have to be careful though, because Chrome will only fire up 6 DNS resolvers. So if you have 6 DNS prefetches and then some critical resources from your own domain or from a subdomain of yours, which isn't in the DNS prefetch list, you may have to wait for one of those DNS resolutions to complete before you get a chance to resolve your own DNS, which would be a really exciting problem to have again. And preloading fonts or preloading CSS. Preloading CSS is only good if you don't need it to build the page. Preloading fonts is always good as long as you don't load too many, because it delays initial render. Oh, another video is not going to work. This is a good one as well. So imagine over here, we have Shopify.com loading without any text. Shopify did implemented preload on their fonts and got their time to first text from 2.3 seconds to 1.2 seconds with no other changes. So it's a good thing to do because Shopify did it. Has anyone here used service workers to intercept requests to third parties? Yes. Patrick, what did you do?
You erase them.
Yeah.
Dean wrote a very good blog post in the WebPerf. Erase them against a SLA.
Yep.
If they failed the SLA, i.e. the third party didn't load within a second or two, then
empty response. Yeah, and then you can also beacon information back to you to say this third party's failed its SLA. You can see how often it's failing, which is really cool. But it's not the kind of thing you'd install a service worker to do solely. But if you had a service worker there already, it's quite a nice little additional feature. Who here uses sub-resource integrity? None of you use third-party JavaScript, so this is fine. But you can check the files that the browser's down, or get the browser to check the files it's downloading against a hash or cryptographic hash that you have provided it. So if someone malicious has got into that font provider's website and you're trying to download their CSS and their CSS says, let's make all the text white, this will fail that hash check and it will refuse to execute the code. And content security policy. So this is, in the Hackernoon post, the guy said, you can get around almost anything with content security policy. What's nice is most people aren't clever enough to do it. And it's a great way of policing the content on your site, not necessarily from malicious third parties, which is what it was intended for, but against malicious first parties. So someone tries to sneak in an advertising tag. It would fail the content security policy, and you can have it just to report back. There's a service called Report URI, which will analyze all your CSP reports for you and give you nice and detailed analysis of which assets are trying to be executed on your site. But as a minimum, you need the default source set to self. And the default source doesn't apply to form actions, so you need form action set to self as well. What that means is, by default, you can only load fonts, JavaScript, CSS from your own domain. You'd have to add subdomains into there yourself. But also, you can only submit forms to you. So there's quite a good cross-site hack where when you submit a form, it submits it to a third party, says, thank you very much, I'll take all that data, responds back to it and say, oh, sorry, can you submit it again? And most people will just click, yes, go, because, you know, who cares? Things fail all the time. Which is the same way that the car remote control unlocks get hacked. It doesn't work, so you press it again, and then it's fine. The next day, the people come back with the recording of the code that you clicked to unlock your car. And Report URI not only analyzes your CSP reports for you, it also builds a CSP for you. So, in summary, everything. What I planned to do when I started writing this talk was do this really cool analysis of all the third parties and what impact they have, and that data's all there. But actually what we need more than anything is kind of a checklist to say, how can I influence what's on the application that I work on? Because oftentimes you'll see something that's bad. It'll only be bad in production because that's when the script gets executed. And then you kind of forget about it, or you say to someone, this is wrong, we should fix it. And then you get back to your daily job. So a checklist of things that you can do to help work out why it's bad, how bad it is, and what you can give to someone to say, this is how bad it is, we should really fix it, is what I was trying to achieve. And if you follow me on Twitter with a really hard to read Twitter handle there, there's a blog post coming out this week, which has all of this and more in it. So good luck. It's a fun world out there. Thank you very much.
Right, that was good, wasn't it? Did I miss anything for the 10 minutes that I was out? So, but anyway, I don't think so. Anyway, so thank you all so much for coming, listening to talks. Hope you had a good time, and hope you will kind of come along to our future events and Delta V and all those other good performance things that are going on in the future. I'll give me a few minutes just to get the pizzas laid out, and then you can all come and have something to eat. Hope to see you all in February. Thank you very much.